expansion was discussed both at a committee level and at the board, and ultimately the league office was tasked by our board with doing an in-depth analysis of all.
When the numbers came in for the WNBA's record-breaking season, everyone in the front office knew the exact reason behind the sudden surge in global interest. Millions of eyes were glued to screens, arenas were selling out in minutes, and lucrative network deals were being finalized at a pace never seen in women's sports history. At the center of this massive financial renaissance was a single player whose star power transformed an entire league overnight. But behind closed doors, inside the front office of the Indiana Fever, a quiet storm was brewing that threatened to derail everything league executives had worked so hard to build. Top leadership, including NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, realized that controlling the narrative of the league's bright future was far harder than creating it. The issue wasn't coming from external competition or rival franchises. It was festering right inside the Fever's own coaching staff. Reports began circulating that newly appointed head coach Stephanie White was making tactical decisions that left fans, analysts, and high-level executives completely stunned. Instead of building every single play around their generational talent, evidence began surfacing that White was intentionally shifting primary offensive duties toward veteran guard Kelsey Mitchell. For a league relying heavily on the momentum of its biggest draw, this sudden tactical detour wasn't just a simple coaching preference. It was a high-stakes gamble that sent shockwaves all the way to the top. To understand how this rift escalated so quickly, you have to look at the massive high-stakes environment created over the past year. The arrival of Caitlin Clark delivered an unprecedented surge in broadcast ratings, merchandise sales, and national media coverage, turning every single Fever game into a must-watch event. Franchise leaders knew that every lineup choice, substitution pattern, and play call would be analyzed under a high-powered microscope. When the organization parted ways with former head coach Christy Sides, the move was widely viewed as a clear signal that Indiana was ready to construct a tailored, hyper-efficient system entirely suited for their superstar guard. Stephanie White was brought in as a proven mind with deep roots in the organization, bringing a track record of tactical discipline and defensive toughness from her time with the Connecticut Sun. On paper, the hire seemed like a home run that would bridge the gap between young promise and championship execution. But transition periods in professional sports rarely follow the fairy tale script fans hope for, and the early signs of friction emerged far sooner than anyone anticipated. As the team settled into their new system, observant fans and veteran analysts began spotting strange patterns in the offensive execution. Instead of the high-octane push-fast pace that catapulted the team into the national spotlight, the offense began slowing down into structured half-court sets. In crucial moments, the ball was repeatedly placed in the hands of veteran star Kelsey Mitchell, while the rookie superstar was relegated to standing in the corner as a secondary decoy. While Mitchell is undoubtedly one of the most explosive, dynamic scorers in the entire league, the decision to systematically pull the ball away from Clark raised immediate red flags across the basketball world. It wasn't just a minor variation in play calling. It looked like a fundamental shift in philosophy. The high-tempo, quick-trigger offense that drew millions of casual viewers was slowly being replaced by a traditional, veteran-heavy grind that completely neutralized Clark's greatest strengths. But that was only the surface of a much deeper, far more complex power struggle brewing in the locker room. Behind the scenes, the internal dynamic between veteran players and the newly arrived rookie phenom had always been a delicate tightrope walk. Kelsey Mitchell had spent years putting her body on the line for the Fever, battling through grueling, lose-heavy seasons long before the bright lights and sold-out crowds arrived. Her loyalty, effort, and elite scoring ability made her a respected leader among her peers, and entering free agency gave her tremendous leverage over the franchise's future. Stephanie White, a coach who built her career on rewarding veteran discipline and structured play, naturally gravitated toward Mitchell's battle-tested reliability. White believed that relying solely on a young player, regardless of her rare talent, was a recipe for instability down the stretch. But by leaning heavily into Mitchell's isolations and mid-range game, White inadvertently created a visible rift in the team's identity. The stark contrast in play styles began sparking subtle body language cues on the court, with frustrated hand movements, missed fast break opportunities, and awkward huddle interactions that sharp-eyed viewers immediately caught. And what happened next would shock everyone involved in the league's inner circle. Word of this growing internal friction did not stay contained within the team's practice facility for long. As game film analysis went viral online, showing instance after instance of Clark being bypassed on open transitions, high-ranking executives in New York took notice. For NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and the WNBA's executive board, the situation was far more than a simple basketball disagreement between a coach and her guards. The league had just secured historic, multi-billion-dollar media rights deals that were directly tied to the record-setting viewership metrics driven by Clark's explosive style of play. Networks were paying premium prices, expecting to broadcast deep logo three-pointers, full-court transition passes, and electric basketball drama. Seeing the league's prime attraction turned into an off-ball spot-up shooter threatened to cool down the massive rating spikes that were fueling the sport's economic boom. Whispers began circulating that executive phone calls were made to Indiana's upper management, demanding answers about why the team's primary strategic asset was being sidelined in key offensive sequences. The pressure on Stephanie White quickly magnified into an absolute pressure cooker from all angles. On one side, she faced the professional duty of managing a locker room filled with proud, hard-working veterans who felt they deserved their fair share of touches and credit. On the other side, she was battling an overwhelming corporate force and a global fan base that demanded total dedication to their superstar asset. Kelsey Mitchell's stellar individual play only complicated matters further, as she consistently produced high-scoring games that validated White's decision to run plays through her. Mitchell proved time and again that she was an elite offensive weapon capable of taking over games on her own terms. However, the metric data showed a glaring reality. When the ball remained stagnated in isolation plays, the team's overall offensive efficiency dropped, and the high-energy flow that made them lethal against top-tier opponents completely evaporated. The strategic stubbornness was beginning to cost the team potential victories, transforming a minor ideological difference into a full-blown organizational crisis. As the media circus intensified, sports talk shows and online commentators picked apart every single possession, creating an environment where every missed pass was interpreted as a sign of disrespect. Insiders began speculating about potential long-term fallout, hinting that key figures within Clark's camp were quietly dissatisfied with the offensive direction. The fear of alienating a generational talent, a player who literally shifted the economic landscape of women's basketball, sent shockwaves through the front office. History in professional sports is filled with cautionary tales of elite franchises losing generational players due to early career coaching mismatches and misaligned offensive philosophies. If Indiana failed to fix this tactical identity crisis, they risked undermining the very foundation of their long-term championship window. But resolving the issue was far easier said than done, as Stephanie White refused to publicly back down from her coaching principles, holding firm that team success required a balanced, multi-option offense rather than a single-player show. This intense standoff highlighted a massive cultural shift happening across the entire WNBA landscape. For decades, the league operated on a strict, old-school mentality, where rookies, no matter how gifted, were expected to pay their dues, wait their turn, and defer to established veterans. But the explosive arrival of Clark completely shattered that traditional playbook, bringing unprecedented revenue, attention, and fan expectations overnight. This sudden evolution forced longtime coaches and veteran players to adapt to a reality where the traditional rules of hierarchy no longer applied. Stephanie White found herself caught directly in the crosshairs of this historical transition, attempting to enforce traditional veteran hierarchy in an era defined by hyper-accelerated stardom. The friction between Mitchell's earned veteran status and Clark's transcendent impact created a daily tightrope walk that threatened to fracture the team's locker room chemistry beyond repair. As the situation escalated, analysts pointed out that the strategic missteps weren't just impacting team morale, they were actively damaging the team's record on the court. Defensive coordinators across the league quickly caught on to Indiana's predictable half-court tendencies under White's system. Opposing teams realized that if they aggressively doubled Clark away from the ball and forced Indiana into slow, late-clock isolation plays for Mitchell, they could effectively neutralize the team's most dangerous threats. The fluid, unpredictable transition game that made Indiana a nightmare to defend during the second half of last season was replaced by predictable, easy-to-scout sets. Despite the obvious tactical stagnation, White doubled down in post-game press conferences, defending her strategic choices and preaching patience to an increasingly restless fan base. But behind the scenes, the front office was feeling the heat from sponsors and league representatives who wanted to see immediate structural adjustments. The tension reached a boiling point during a critical late-game sequence that exposed the deep philosophical divide for everyone to see. With the game on the line and the clock ticking down, White drew up a crucial out-of-bounds play, designed entirely as an isolation drive for Mitchell, leaving Clark completely stationary on the weak side wing. The play resulted in a contested, highly difficult shot that fell short, handing the opposing team a bitter victory. The immediate aftermath on the court was tense, with Clark walking straight off the floor without engaging in the customary team huddle, while White and Mitchell quietly exited toward the tunnel. Social media exploded within seconds, with fans and analysts dissecting the final play from every conceivable angle, calling out the head coach for baffling tactical decisions in crunch time. The visual evidence was indisputable, and the public outcry forced team executives to immediately confront the uncomfortable reality unfolding on their home court. In the days following that controversial loss, emergency meetings were reportedly held within the Fever's organizational structure to address the rising tension. Front office leaders recognized that they could not afford to let a coaching preference compromise the franchise's multi-million-dollar trajectory or alienate their flagship superstar. While honoring Kelsey Mitchell's contributions was important, the cold, hard realities of professional sports business dictated that long-term strategic decisions had to prioritize the team's ultimate centerpiece. Reports suggested that management delivered a clear message regarding the team's tactical direction, emphasizing that the offense needed to return to a high-pace, Clark-centric model that maximized open-court playmaking. The pressure was no longer just coming from fans on the internet. It was coming directly from the people who signed the paychecks and held the keys to the organization's future. Despite the intense pressure from management, implementing a complete tactical overhaul in the middle of a demanding schedule is a monumental challenge. Coaches rarely like being told how to run their playbooks, especially when they possess decades of elite experience at the collegiate and professional levels. Stephanie White faced an ultimatum: adapt her preferred defensive-heavy, slow-paced philosophy to fit the explosive talents of her young superstar, or risk losing her standing with the franchise entirely. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell found herself caught in the middle of a corporate tug-of-war, balancing her natural scoring instinct with the reality that her role needed to shift to accommodate a different style of basketball. The locker room atmosphere grew increasingly guarded, with players attempting to block out the overwhelming media noise while trying to figure out their identity on the floor. As the team worked behind closed doors to iron out their differences, the broader sports world watched with bated breath to see how the situation would unfold. League executives understood that how Indiana handled this delicate situation would set a precedent for how future superstar rookies were integrated into professional teams. If a franchise could allow tactical resistance to diminish the impact of a generational talent, it raised serious questions about management efficiency and strategic vision. On the flip side, if the organization could successfully align White's tactical discipline with Clark's transcendent playmaking, they possessed all the ingredients necessary to build a dominant, long-lasting championship dynasty. The stakes could not possibly be higher for everyone involved, from the players on the court to the highest offices in the league's headquarters. To bridge the gap, basketball experts suggested a compromise that would allow both Mitchell and Clark to thrive, without sacrificing the team's overall tempo. By utilizing Clark as the primary ball handler in early transition offense, and using Mitchell as an off-ball slashing threat against unsettled defenses, Indiana could create an unstoppable, high-scoring backcourt combination. This approach required Mitchell to embrace more catch-and-shoot opportunities, while allowing Clark total freedom to read the floor and dictate the pace of the game. For Stephanie White, accepting this blueprint meant relinquishing a degree of tactical control and placing ultimate trust in her young star's decision-making instincts. It was a test of adaptability and leadership that would ultimately define her tenure as head coach of the franchise. As subsequent games approached, subtle shifts began appearing in the team's play calling and rotational lineups, hinting that the internal conversations were beginning to yield actual results. The pace of play gradually increased, with Clark regaining primary control of the ball in transition and orchestrating the offense with her signature court vision. Mitchell continued to put up impressive scoring numbers, but her touches came more within the flow of the fast-paced offense rather than isolated half-court possessions. The visual dynamic on the court began to look smoother, with improved communication, high fives during timeouts, and a noticeable boost in overall team energy. While the road ahead remains filled with challenges, the early adjustments provided a small glimpse of what the team could accomplish when everyone moves in the exact same direction. However, the ultimate test for this fragile piece will come when the team faces high-pressure, late-game situations against elite championship contenders down the stretch. Under the bright lights of national broadcasts, with millions of fans watching every single possession, there will be zero room for tactical stubbornness or internal hesitation. Stephanie White's ability to stay committed to a high-tempo, superstar-led offense during adversity will determine whether this drama was simply a temporary growing pain or the beginning of a deeper organizational rift. For Adam Silver and the WNBA front office, the hope is that business interests and basketball execution can finally exist in perfect harmony. But as history has proven time and time again in professional sports, when massive money, ego, and generational talent collide, the dramatic twists and turns are rarely over. As Indiana continues its journey through an unprecedented era of attention and expectation, every single decision made by the coaching staff will carry immense weight for the future of the sport. The delicate balance between respecting veteran contributions and unleashing generational talent remains one of the hardest challenges in modern sports management. Whether Stephanie White, Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark can fully synthesize their talents into a cohesive, championship-caliber machine is a question that will keep fans and analysts debating for months to come. One thing is absolute: the basketball world is watching every single move, and the ultimate outcome will echo throughout the league for years to come.